A very good afternoon and welcome to Africa Trade Brief. My name is Nzinga Kunta. Thanks so much for being with us today. We're going to be taking a look at the state of the mining on the continent. I'm joined by Kapiji-Mpanga Mulemba, who's the director of United Machining Works. Thanks so much for your time on SABC News. I know that you are in Zambia now. If you could give us just an overview of the state of mining and trade on the continent.
Good afternoon, Nzinga. Thank you for having me. I'm based up here in Zambia in the copper belt in a town called Chingola, which is home to the second largest open pit copper mine on the continent, and Zambia being the second largest copper producer after the Congo DR. A lot's happening in the mining sector, and there's been a lot of positive and challenges going on in the last couple of years, as I'm sure you're aware. Also based on the cost of copper, and then also some of the issues which have gone around policy and the frameworks, and even mining investments as well. But also when we talk about mining, I think we have to focus on a lot more than just mining of copper, although that's what Zambia is known for. I mean, when we talk of mining, there are three different areas. Then there are the industrial minerals, you have your base metals, and then you have your gemstones as well. So I think it's quite a broad space, and a lot of participation can be had amongst different people in different sectors of the space.
What would you say are the unique trade opportunities, some of which you've touched on now in Zambia in particular?
I think the unique trade opportunities is that Zambia really is a mineral-rich resource country, and it can be very broad in the sense of where do you enter on. I think some of the challenges that we face is that when we think of mining, we think of these huge corporate entities which require a lot of investment to start up with and things, but mining can also be simply somebody running a quarry, collecting stones and crushing on the side of the road, which is quite a common sight in smaller towns and even within Lusaka. So it all depends on what type of mining we're looking at, what entry level we want to go to, and what your ability is to enable to get your product to market, the demand for the market, and also the resources available at the time.
Right now, as a business, you've gone through that cycle of commodity booms and busts. How else have you seen that industry evolving in Zambia?
I mean, what I have seen, particularly in my field, we provide ancillary services. So we have a non-ferrous foundry and a machine shop, a precision engineering machine shop, which focuses on machine repair. Now, a lot of the mining companies have gone from replacement engineering to I've gone to replacement engineering as opposed to rehabilitation of works. So that means that new components are needed and a lot more just-in-time management, as opposed to people having machine shops where they would manufacture spares, agency agreements and things of that nature, where there would be a real skill transfer to local businesses in being able to provide capacity to these organizations and being able to be competitive and to be able to provide services which should ensure that production and all the other things that go into mining continue across the board.
Okay, we've spoken a little bit earlier on about the Democratic Republic of Congo. I just want to get a sense of where you think that mining in the SADC region and beyond is going.
I mean, if we look at the production figures for what's happening in Congo, it's phenomenal. They've pushed production higher than we are here in Zambia. And it's a lot of investment has gone in. We have to also remember the new players on the market, the traditional mining houses, which you'd find in South Africa, Australia, North America, and Europe, and they're having to compete with Asian companies, Middle Eastern companies as well. And also, I mean, particularly, we cannot go away from the fact of China. China has become a real force in the mining space, and anybody who's based in the SADC region would be able to testify to that. And even from Congo DR, I mean, we've gone from seeing a lot more familiar names in mining to newer Chinese companies coming in, setting up, going into the multi-economic zones, building and bringing in their own manufacturing capacities, and then also bringing in their own culture. Because each country, each continent comes with its own culture and its own approach in how they do things, even though everybody's chasing a bottom line and trying to hit production figures.
When we speak about that, there's a sense when I was researching what's happening in mining now, that mining companies, whether cynically or not, are starting to look at more than just profits, starting to look at environmental factors, societal factors and governance issues, perhaps a little bit more than they were doing a decade or so ago. Do you think that's a correct assessment?
I think that's a correct assessment and a very fair assessment because of sustainability. anything which has, I mean, that's been a key word for a long period of time. But you have to remember, some of these mines were discovered in the 1920s and 1930s, and they've still been mining the ore bodies. Now, if you can envision digging holes in the ground and having to build communities around that, the infrastructure which needs to go around that, the growth of the population which should be going around the displacement of people, then also the changing nature of what happens within society, governments as well, which have come and gone, the policies which have been there. It really is a long-term thing. And again, it's capital intensive. So you're also looking at raising capital and being entrusted with people's money to be able to give them a dividend at the end of the day in a venture which you're proposing to go into. And it being Africa, we haven't always been given the fairest of, I guess, rating assessments based on historical factors and other issues, which I mean, anybody can read into. But then again, we're doing our best to ensure that there is that return. Communities are provided for, because ultimately it would be much cheaper to pull resources from the local areas than calling in expats with a certain skill or expertise and then paying them exorbitant rates to which would be comparable to the locals in the market. And that's where this is key thing of sustainability and looking at what's feasible and what's long-term. I can commend the mining companies for, and even government policies.
All right, so as we wrap up, what are the challenges that are presented to mining now, and also taking a look at AI and the future? How are those going to clash perhaps as we go forward?
I think with anything, we have to be very aware that it's going to be much less labor intensive. I mean, data plays a big part in it, and analytics as well. And if you look at even just the equipment which has come on board, and how the newer mines do their mining in comparison to the older mines, and also the cost of production as well. It's taken huge shifts and huge changes. But in saying that, there's still a lot of opportunity. Again, as I mentioned, within the ancillary services and within other aspects which go around mining as well. Primarily, Zambia will be known as a mining country. And I also think that that's not going to change in the foreseeable future, just based on the rich deposits and the culture which we have here. In terms of opportunity and challenges, I mean, the copper price was at 9,900. It's through the roof. It's a great time to have copper, even with this COVID-19 pandemic going on. And then just looking at opportunities and what will be feasible and what changes are happening just globally within the market, whether it be in electronics, electronic vehicles, and being able to place ourselves as a country, as entrepreneurs, and as young Africans in a space which would really get value for the materials which come from here.
Thank you very much for your time on Africa Trade Brief on SABC News this afternoon. Kapiji-Mpanga Mulemba, who is the Director of United Machining Works, giving us some insight there into mining on Zambia and beyond. Let's take a look at some of the risks that have been identified to mining on the continent now. We're going to bring up graphics which show us in the next graphic what kind of risks have been identified. He spoke a little bit about some of them now. This is from KPMG, who says commodity price risks are featured quite high on what are the risks to mining on the continent. You'll see that it was also taking place in 2019, one of the highest there, permitting risks, access to capital, including liquidity, community relations and social licensing to operate. We also discussed that in the interview. Those are some of the challenges, as well as political instability we're seeing, not just with mining, but with commodities in countries like Mozambique. Political instability, stopping that gas project completely there, militants coming in, insurgents coming in and stopping that, and any infrastructure bill that was going to take place there. Global trade war, we know that there were issues of nationalism that were really increasing, especially coming from the States a little bit earlier on in the last year or two. That's also a risk that's come in, a new risk that wasn't there in 2019, as you can see on there, and the ability to access and replace reserves. So those are some of the risks that have been identified by KPMG when it comes to mining on the continent. Let's stay with KPMG in a survey that they took of 16 countries where the top 10 risks in mining were identified across the world. This is not Africa specific like the previous one, but the top one being commodity price risk. We also see permitting risk, lots of overlaps on those two there. The ability to access and replace reserves coming in at number 9. Tailings management coming in. Environmental risks, including new regulations, regulatory and compliance changes. Global trade war, economic downturn, uncertainty and political instability listed by those 16 countries when they surveyed what are the biggest challenges to mining. So although we've spoken about the challenges, what are the opportunities for growth and how does mining contribute to Africa's economy? Again, we are staying with KPMG's 2020 outlook on mining, and I'm quoting here. Out of the 54 African sovereign states, including islands recorded by the United Nations, the CIA says 46 have mineral resources of commercial importance. And when you can see the contribution to wealth here in blue, there's different varying shades of blue there, which shows how mining contributes to wealth across our continent. And you can see almost every country there getting economic gain from mining across the continent. Of course, we can talk about how fair and how people benefit from that, which is still a challenge on the continent. Of course, we can't talk about trade, mining and commodities in 2021 without bringing up COVID-19. So let's take a look at how lockdown has impacted mines in different parts of the continent now. You can see Angola, there was a lockdown period of 44 days. This is from miningtechnology.com. The start of the lockdown was the 27th of March. The impact there was stopping completely of operations. Botswana, also a very big diamond producer, 36-day lockdown period starting on the 2nd of April. Also, we saw stoppage of operations. And of course, that knockdown effect can't be emphasized enough. Burkina Faso, the Democratic Republic of Congo, also experiencing lockdowns of over 30 days. Mines closed for 2 days, partial impact on operations in Burkina Faso. Some miners continued to operate through the lockdown. We see in Lesotho there was a 37-day lockdown. Operations were on hold and they only started again on the 27th of April. South Africa, of course, where we are coming to you from now, there was a 21-day complete lockdown followed by a 30-day partial lockdown that started on the 26th of March. Of course, we know we're on day 410 of the lockdown in South Africa. There was a complete halt of operations for 21 days, but from the 16th of April, mining could resume. And in our neighbors, Zimbabwe, there was a 23 days of a complete national lockdown followed by 14 days with restrictions. There was a complete stop of operations for 23 days. So as time goes on, we're going to see the impact of those lockdowns on the mining sector and the economies of these different countries listed. And that's where we leave it for today when we take a look at the state of mining on the African continent. Let's take a look now at how African markets and currencies are performing.